Go ahead.
Okay, great. So yeah, the part that I was cut off by with a time limit is really the part about, so what do we do about this? And the part that's come into my life in the last year that is, I now see as core, is learning to love, honor, and cherish oneself. I'm a sixth house Mars Moon person, and I find a lot of Virgo-like people in astrology. And in addition to analyzing and all that, one thing we're really good at is picking ourselves to pieces. And this, I see, is at the core of not only healing and wholeness, but ultimately at the core of changing the world consciousness, one being at a time. And the gist of it is, this goes back to what I was saying about religions. We have religions, you know, one of my cute, I make up cute little sayings. One of my cute little sayings about, I happen to be Jewish by birth, so I'm not Catholic, but I've spent probably more time in my life around Catholic people than around Jews. And so my cute little summary of Catholicism used to be, you were born in sin and it's all downhill from there. And that's there are a lot of things about Catholicism I really appreciate, so I just want to add that. What I mean is that all of our religions, in fact, you know, sometimes I say, you know, the Jews preceded the Catholics, so they are better at guilt because they've had longer to master it. This is what we've learned. Another one, I just recently realized something in which I've made into another cute saying is, I just figured out the first time in my life I heard that I was doing something wrong. It was about 1 minute after I was born. And most of us have grown up like this, by well-meaning, in many cases, most cases, parents, just trying to do the best they can, who had the same conditioning patterns. And they get passed on. And as a person who's become quite influential in my thinking lately, said essentially, the reality is we are souls. We're souls. We're not people, humans. We're souls. And the souls are living in a state of more awareness, purity on the other side, so to speak. And it's like, oh, this thing is going on the earth, and I want to go down in. I want to help. I want to help bring about this change. Maybe I have some things to clean up too, but for many of us, the core motivation was, I want to serve. And in order to do that, we have to have a vehicle, and that puts us in a family. And that deeply shapes and colors our perceptions of who we are and how we live. Obviously, or it's obvious to me that the family that we pick is not just random. It's not like picking out a name in a phone book. Though it might be, I don't know. But that's not random either. And there's reasons for it. And so I've been introduced to this idea, and it's a little bit related to the Native American thing about 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. So yeah, the gist of it is we have these deep conditioning patterns. I think this is pretty universal. The only difference is some people have it a lot more than others. But we all have these basic patterns of putting ourselves down, feeling less than. Even people that are running, I use Trump as an example because he's so extreme. Well, anybody that's acting like they're the greatest thing in the universe, to me, it's really clear that inside themselves, they're compensating for the fact that they actually feel the opposite of that. And they're really out of touch with it, really out of touch with it. So we all have we have learned to put ourselves down, to second guess ourselves, to judge ourselves, to beat ourselves up. That's another one of my cute sayings is, once I started realizing I was spending my life beating myself up and I tried to stop, I found myself beating myself up about beating myself up. So my cute saying was, beating myself up about beating myself up is still beating myself up. This pattern has to go. And it can only go through love, not through whipping oneself. We have to realize these are very wounded, here we go with the Chiron again, wounded child places in us. We have heard all our life about all the things, I didn't do good enough, I should have done this, woulda, coulda, all that. And we have imprinted these voices in us. And it is step by step, millimeter by millimeter, inch by inch, breath by breath, second by second, turning that pattern around to really practicing loving self. This goes with the repressed and unwanted feelings I was talking about before. Finding that one inside. Knowing me, I have a side of me that's pissed off at the way things are in the world. And then I have judgments on that. And it's what I come to see is there's reasons why I feel that way. They're valid reasons in my experience. It doesn't mean I necessarily want to feed them, but it's a part of me that wants to be understood. People don't like an angry person, so if a person has anger in them, they try to hide, or one approach is they try to hide the anger so people don't judge them. But what if there's validity to that voice in that person's experience of why they're angry? That side just wants to be heard. It's tired of people telling it that it should go away. The same with sadness. There's validity behind these feelings. There's validity behind everything that we feel. Very few people were raised that way. This is part of the change. This is part of the necessary change. Very, very gently, very, very slowly, to cut self slack. I practice this. I catch myself saying things about myself in an angry tone or a judgmental tone, and I stop. I stop. Because I know that at my core, I'm very sincere. I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. We're not supposed to be perfect. And it's okay to not be perfect. And it's okay to make a mistake and slip. We don't need to beat ourselves up. So I can go on and on about that. But that's the core, really, to me, of turning this around. Because our actual identity is an emanation of divinity or of creative force. The underlying layer of the universe of all life is this profound love I think most of us have experienced that, at least at times, that this just exists universally. We don't necessarily stay there, but we know that it's there. That's our actual nature. And so here we are, oftentimes, what it feels like quite far from that in the way we're treating ourselves. If that's our actual nature, it's learning to treat ourselves in that way. If you're a mom and you have a 3 or 5-year-old and they're clumsy and they fall down or they do something silly, probably smacking them over the head is a less effective strategy than really holding them and nurturing them in that moment and saying, it's okay, dear. And it's like us remembering and learning how to treat ourselves in that way. And through this, as I change myself, I'm then better able to relate to other people from a similar place. I'm finding this going on in my life. And the more people who can treat others with respect and consideration, no matter what they're saying or where they're coming from, which is not, I don't find that a particularly easy thing to do, but I know that I can do it at times. That's like the acceptance that everyone's really looking for. And you can make a good case that's why people are angry in the first place. They haven't had that. They've been treated crappy. And they're acting that out because they're mad about it. So treating them crappy again isn't helping. That doesn't mean to be a doormat either. We can go to questions.
Okay, any questions, anybody? Please just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Definitely unmute yourself.
Steve, I may as well just say something while we're waiting. I noticed you mentioned something about divine innocence.
Yeah.
Which is really beautiful to me. Would you say that, that there is divine innocence, which is Pisces, and that radical understanding would be more Uranus? So there seems to be at times in our lives when we have really incredible understanding, and at other times the divine innocence or actually ignorance.
Well, let's call it innocence.
Innocence, yes.
Yeah. This is very interesting because I'm a person, I'm in what they call a Gyani kind of person, which is like in Hinduism, a person that seeks the truth through wisdom and understanding and knowing how things work. And so this person appeared in my life in the last year, and is basically like, because he'd been through this path, and it's like, well, where's your understanding getting you? So you understand the way things are. This is part of my comment on astrology now. And I am not in any way saying that we don't need astrology or there's anything wrong with it or whatever. I guess what I'm saying is there's limits to it. That's what I've been experiencing. And the gist of it is that the way this guy put it is, whatever you suddenly understand through this great burst of insight, and I have spent my life having great bursts of insights, that becomes the next thing that's getting in the way of your even next burst of insight. Because we become attached to our understandings, is the point. We start identifying with them. This is what I understand. Where, in a deeper sense, it's from the heart. It's the love path, because that cuts everything. Because there's no one alive some people may react to Lev in a hostile or aggressive way, which is only a sign of how they've been treated. But Lev from the heart, kindness, caring, giving, concern, affects everyone. And that's not always a perspective that many of us have had. There are people, it's one of the paths. Another Hindu path is bhakti, which is the path of heart, the path of love. Now, they're not mutually exclusive. In fact, I think we need pieces of all of them because they're different elements of life. But it's really, when you have understanding without heart, you have a bunch of people sitting around in a room yelling at each other about how each other's identification of philosophy is wrong. and I have the truth. My truth trumps your truth and all that. And that's not love. And so without that, love is the realization if we're all one, then how I'm treating anything else from a bug to a human, to an elephant, to a being from another planet, is part of me in the broadest sense. It's beyond my ability to understand how that's part of me, yet I can sense, not just intellectually, we're all one, but the connection, really that we have this one source. So to me, it's got to start there. And I'm reprogramming myself to realize that. And there's a lot, and a part of this that isn't necessarily fun all the time and that we tend to resist is that the more I move towards an open heart, the more it brings up all of the things that are yet unhealed. And that's the shadow. And those are the places in we humans, we don't acknowledge. We don't want to acknowledge. We don't want to recognize. Because we don't want to, because the shadow is the parts we have tossed out, that we have judged as less than, bad, not good enough. So I may have a capacity at times in certain moods, in certain states, in certain traumatized places, to do things that may hurt other people or cause pain to other people. And I don't want to see myself that way, so I just toss that part out. But just because I'm saying that's not me, that's somebody, that's where projection comes in. The parts of self I can't own, I then see in somebody else. I think it's them. It's more like I'm looking in a mirror and I don't want the reflection there. So I don't see me there, I see that person there. That's where the love comes in. Because if I can understand what is it in me that's making me act in ways that are okay in certain circumstances and causing hurt or pain to other people, when I would stand up here all day telling you that that's so not in my value system. And yet, there are places in me, as yet unintegrated and unhealed, where at times that can occur. So instead of pushing them out, I'm learning, it's like, okay, to that part, what is it you need? What is it you want? Why do you feel, and I have to be very careful with the language because we're going to carry our judgments into the way we speak to those parts of ourselves. If I have prejudice against being that way, I'm going to say, oh, angry part. But that's rejecting that part. You see what I mean? That's rejecting it. We need to include it. We need to incorporate those parts into us, to drop our judgments on ourselves. And I'm not saying by that it's okay for me to go around acting like a jerk, and annoying people just because I'm angry. A lot of this are things that really are for us to, I believe, are things for us to work out within ourselves. But for us to do that, we have to first be willing and able to accept those parts of ourselves and not feel so terrible about having them that we can't even admit that they're there. Because that's the very sort of thing that's going to create circumstances in the life when it's time to deal with that, that's going to bring them up. Another thing I've learned, which was very foreign to my thinking, is that when something is coming up, maybe that I don't like, it's coming up because it's wanting healing. And the present moment is the circumstance where that can occur. It may be extremely uncomfortable to me. I may not want to feel it at all. But as I look at it that way, it's not that I'm some bad person because I'm having this awful thought, but that this part of me is coming up because it wants to be included. We could look at this as astrologically wise. You know, Uranus, 11th Aquarius, is fracturing, fragmentation, fracturing. Well, our personality structures, even our soul structures, are fractured from the traumas we have occurred, that we have experienced, and our personality is fragments. It's why we have wars within ourselves. One side wants to do this, one side doesn't want to do that, and they fight with each other. And we tend to be able to draw in somebody to take one of those sides and have an argument with. They're representing one side of us and we're representing the other side. But if we got somebody that's representing the other side that person wasn't, then we'd have a different argument with that, because we're arguing with ourselves. We're trying to find integration. How can I have opposing forces within myself about the same thing? That can be crazy making, or I can learn to accept this is just part of the way humans are wired at this point in time, and it's okay.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hi there. There have been so many different points that you've making that are stirring all sorts of different thoughts and questions that I have in my head. And if it's okay, I might try to dot back to just a couple of things that you'd said. You were talking about people knowing things intellectually, but if they don't know it in their heart, then you just get a bunch of people arguing their different points of view. And you're talking about how astrology doesn't give us the full map to this new level of consciousness that we are, primed to obtain soon, and that there's a lot of new tools that we have to learn how to use that astrology maybe isn't adequately providing at this time. It's been my experience that seeing the chart, seeing astrology, the archetypes of astrology, is not having shadows themselves, that it is in fact us that have the shadows, and when we experience those archetypes in a shadow way, that we're just blocking the natural impulse of those signs and those archetypes to do their work in a positive way for us, that they are kind of the where we can seek equilibrium, we can see any way that we're experiencing it as a shadow shows where we're not in balance with those particular archetypes. And the one example you gave of people knowing something intellectually but not taking into their hearts, I see as the balancing between the Aquarius and Leo archetypes. Leo is the heart, and the Aquarius being the higher mind, and those 2 points needing to be integrated. And then looking at all of the zodiac in that way, seeing where there's this balancing mechanism that if we can not, we could maybe look at our chart to ascertain where we came in, like relative to those different energies, but seek in our lifetime to no longer be bound to any one position where we are, but to integrate all of it as an entire balancing system within us, so that we're at a place of total equilibrium and harmony within ourselves, and how we can do our work out in the world. And so I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts about that. And one other thing was that you were talking about religion and all these religions kind of raising us up in this very Virgo way, but it's all the shadow side of Virgo. It's all the critical, not good enough, and the aspect of religion that has to do with service, but it's not obvious. A lot of times that gets really distorted, and it's really in service to the church. He just wants more and more of us and wants us to be good little servants of the church, But within that Virgo archetype, there's, and I might be wrong about this, but as I understand the whole story and symbolism of Jesus Christ, being born of a virgin is actually symbolic of him being born under the sign of Virgo. And so there's something about that archetype of Virgo that is represented in the story of Christ. And sorry, just a moment. Rudolf Steiner talks about this next leap in evolution being likened to Christ consciousness. What the story of Christ is based on, representative, is a new burst of consciousness and enlightenment that he in the story represents, that we can and should be able to attain for ourselves. And that it happens, that there's taking into consideration that Jesus was of the sign of Virgo.
Well, I agree with everything you said. I think there's a lot that's quite insightful in what you said. My perspective is that most people I've ever met need in learning how to deal with their shadow, because it's so foreign to the way we were raised. And so I kind of look at it as astrology can point the way. It can even point out what the shifts needed are, the key. And if you have a way to do that through astrology, I think that's awesome. I'm not trying to put astrology down. I just feel like it's a tool. And, tools are not infinite, and they serve their purpose. To develop our heart, we need to develop our heart, to develop a relationship with our heart. That comes from the inside. And part of that for many people is even receiving permission and then giving themselves permission that is an okay thing to do. That is an okay thing to do. Because a lot of our conditionings are so extreme, the person isn't even, sure, here we know, of course it's okay. But in terms of the emotional patterns inside, no, there's places in there that have actually gotten in trouble for being that way, been put down, etc. So it's like those places, these are hurt child places. And to me, I'm learning the parental parts of myself, the adult parts of myself, can participate by being the parent to those child places and parent those places in a way that I wish I had received when I was a child. And it's not because I had horrible parents, I didn't, but it's because they themselves didn't know. They weren't raised that way, and it hadn't come to them. And so, to me, that's what we're doing, or this movement or this path and direction, whatever modality and however it takes, to anything that works for anybody that's leading them to feel more self-love, more okay with themselves. I don't care how they're getting there. I think it's fabulous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really think for the most part, the shadows we express are just places where we really do have to parent ourselves, where we didn't get that. I think we're all just children,
Yeah, well, we have the child places. That's one of the things I'm learning is that I believe that there's a self, like a me, a self, and I'm finding more and more through some wise inputs that actually isn't even the case, because most of us have 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 selves. And they're all different voices.
Steve?
Yeah.
We have less than a minute to go, so we might just stop it there. On behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you so much for talking at 2 of our meetings, and please come again.
Well, you're very welcome, and I will come in.
Everybody now to Steve.
I will come in. I will come in.
Great.
If you want me, I'll be.
Steve, great. Thanks, Steve.